Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Gold Hoops and God podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Guerra, and today I have a fantastic guest. I have Jessica Yañez, who is the host of the Wine and Chisme Podcast. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, how are you?
Yay! It's so good to have you. So Jessica and I connected pretty recently, and I love wine and I love chisme. So I said, this is my new friend. So
I
it's been so
mean,
good.
yeah, there's nothing wrong with a little wine and a little chisme, but
Exactly.
just as just a kind of a heads up in regards to that, when I say chisme, I let the guests spill the chisme on themselves. So it's not
Hmm.
about like gotcha. We definitely once a month talk about what's happening in pop culture. And sometimes I
Hmm.
spill the chisme on myself even.
Love it.
But otherwise, no, it's not about like a gotcha thing. It's really about amplifying voices across
Perfect.
communities of color while we drink a glass
Hmm.
of wine.
Exactly. So it's basically like hanging out with your amigas, and it's so fun. It's
Yes.
awesome. And one thing I wanted to mention also is that Jessica has created the first directory of Latine wineries in the US. So definitely check that out. I'll make sure to link the website and everything when this is released. So thank you,
Yes.
Jessica.
Thank you,
Yay.
Lauren. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Thank you so much. It's so good to have you. So, per usual on the podcast, I love to talk to my guests about culture and faith and then advice they would give their younger selves, right? Because I think that all of us, we have lived and learned so many things. There's so much wisdom out there to share. And so why not share it through a podcast? And so, we'll kind of start at the beginning. So if Jessica, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about your background, how you self identify, where you grew up, all that good stuff. That would be awesome.
Absolutely. So I am a born and raised San Diego County girl. I grew up North County
Hmm.
of San Diego County, and I am a second generation Mexican American, Chicana, Latina. And, I grew up in a obviously I grew up in the 80s. I'm not even gonna like try and pretend I'm an age that I'm not. Like, nah. I definitely grew up in the 80s, and with that, I always felt a little because English was not my first, or English was my first language. Spanish was
Hmm.
not my first language.
Hmm.
However, all my friends were always like Filipino, Vietnamese,
Okay.
obviously a lot of Latinos,
Hmm.
Guatemalan,
Hmm.
Mexican, especially being here in San Diego is
Hmm.
predominant, right? Um, so I always felt kind of like my culture has always been a part of who I am.
Hmm.
That's never in doubt.
Right.
However, I always felt like I was not enough when it came to for not speaking Spanish properly growing up.
Hmm. Hmm.
And a lot of my friends, their parents spoke mostly Spanish. So they would talk to me in Spanish. I would answer them in English or in broken Spanish. As my grandpa got older, he had dementia, so he started speaking more Spanish than English
Oh, interesting.
as it was advancing and everything. But
Hmm.
the people that were always close to me, the people I always were drawn to were always people that came from other communities of color,
Hmm.
particularly other Latinos. And as I've gotten older, I have continued. I've never like diverged from my culture, and I've never
Hmm.
diverged of who I am,
Hmm.
because even my grandpa used to work the groves here in San Diego County. He
Oh,
used to
wow.
be a field worker. So
Wow.
I had gone out when I was little with him, and I remember
Mm-hmm.
seeing that. So it's still very prevalent in who I
Hmm.
am.
Hmm.
Being second generation, I am not ashamed of it. I am not ashamed of my family. I'm not ashamed of my background. Like, I am
Great.
very, very proud of who I am and where I come from. And
Hmm.
um, it's something that I just try and continue to weave throughout everything that I do in everyday life at this point.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I'm also a California girl. I grew up in Los Angeles and have lived in LA. I would say 90% of my life. So that's super cool. Yeah, it's so interesting. Like over the course of the podcast, we're in season 3 now. The topic of Spanish, right? The language
Mhm.
question, right, has come up consistently. And I think, yeah, I mean, everyone has had such different experiences. I understand like why some families didn't teach their children Spanish because of assimilation. There was pushback, right? There's still a lot of racism,
Yeah.
like who are we kidding? Actually, now more
Even
than
amongst
ever,
ourselves, even amongst ourselves. No,
amongst
that's
ourselves, totally. Hmm.
exactly what happened with me and
Hmm.
my parents and my sisters is growing up, my parents' generation, they would get really they would get punished for speaking
Yes,
Spanish.
yes,
It
yes.
was
Hmm.
very frowned upon. It would get so there are certain words that were Spanish first, right? Anything that had
Right.
to come with cleaning was always in Spanish,
I
right?
love it.
Anything, tias, tios. In
Yeah.
California, nina, nino, we say nina, nino
Yes. Hmm.
instead of padrino, madrina. We just kind
Right.
of shorten it.
Right.
But for the longest time, I didn't know what the translation of that was, like the English translation of
Yeah.
that was, because we never said those things. But
Exactly. Yeah.
during this TikTok era,
Hmm.
the whole no sabo thing
Oh
came out, and
yes,
that's really what
it's a
made
phenomenon.
push
Hmm.
forward,
Hmm.
because I'm like,
Hmm.
who are you to
Hmm.
tell anybody? First of all, Spanish is not even the language, like the original language of our people. So,
English is
but
not the official language of the United States. There is no
yes,
official language of the
the-
United States for people who
right.
don't know. Yeah.
There's no official language in the United States, but even
Yeah.
Spanish is not the original language of Mexico, right?
Sure.
Spanish,
Sure.
it's from Spain.
Spain.
However,
Yeah.
obviously, colonization has,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
it's up for hundreds and hundreds of years, it's been the
Right.
main language. However, like I feel like we constantly are forgetting, like, truly where our roots are, right? Truly where our roots lie. And
Yeah.
we can't
Yeah.
berate somebody for not speaking Spanish because their parents
Hmm.
didn't want to get whipped in school. Like,
Right. 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 Exactly. No, it's so true. Like, I may have mentioned this, in a different episode, but I'm very grateful. Again, I feel like sometimes it's just like the perfect combination in either direction, right?
mhm.
So it happens to be that I spent a lot of time with my grandma, who was from Guatemala, and she only spoke Spanish pretty much, And then I'm grateful that like the elementary school and high school that I went to, they had Spanish classes. So then there was, and this is another distinction too. It's like
But the
there were,
Spanish and Spanish classes, because I took Spanish as well, and actually
yeah,
Spanish is my minor.
yeah,
Uh, it's not
it's
the
different.
same.
It's
It's
different,
very
exactly.
different because they're teaching you like Castilian. They're
Castilian
teaching you
Spanish,
Spanish from Spain, not Spanish
exactly.
from even Latin America or Mexico.
Right.
So it is
Mhm.
definitely different.
For sure. So exactly, I think for many of us who grew up in Spanish speaking households, we might be pretty strong in terms of verbal communication, but when it comes to like reading a literature book or reading poetry or writing an essay in Spanish with the grammar, it's different, right? And I think you're right. Like it's just
Yes.
yeah,
It's so funny when you say that, Lauren, is because um people are like, well, you can, like, now my Spanish is okay, it's not perfect, but if I'm in Mexico, or if I'm fine, like I can have a full
you
conversation,
make
I
your
can,
way. Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
can make my way through
Right.
whatever. But the whole thing about, now I just forgot, now I just lost my train of
Oh, the
thought.
written Spanish or
Oh, the right.
plain Spanish.
I
Yeah.
tell people, well, you speak English. How is your written English? How is your grammar? How is your, like, it's the
Exactly.
same
Yeah.
thing. And
Hmm.
then
Hmm.
even within parts of the US,
Hmm.
um, people say different words, different slang
Exactly.
words within our own country.
Country,
So,
absolutely, exactly. The way, if we talk about, right, if we talk about vocabulary, colloquial speech, right? If we think of someone who's from the Bay Area, hella, like I'll say hella, even though I'm not from there, I live there, and it's stuck, right? I'm like, oh, like that's hella dumb or whatever. Like it's, or someone from the South, like there's certain words, right, that are pretty identifiable from different parts of the country, and that's one country,
mhm.
right? So so much so am I trying to say? And the same, there you go. The same is true in Latin America and the Caribbean. Like we have different words for this for different things, you know. But I appreciate that. I appreciate you sharing that for sure. How cool! So you're from San Diego.
I
Awesome.
am. I'm a San
Yay.
Diego girl through and
I
through.
love it. I love it. Let's see. And so yeah, so I would love to hear also a little bit about, you know, your experience in terms of exposure to religion or faith. That's another something that I found really fascinating. I think Latinas are so diverse, right? Like, in other words, everyone assumes that all, right, all Latinas, Latinx people are Christian, which is not the case.
Mhm.
Or even more specifically, that we're all Catholic. That's not true, you know? And so I really want to highlight like how varied and how unique we all are, you know? And
Yeah.
then on top of that, that like there's different traditions. There's Santeria, curanderismo, you know, there's Latinx Muslims. There's a
Yeah.
plethora of traditions. So I would love to hear from you a little bit. Yeah. Mhm.
Well, I want to share something like and I don't remember this, but my direct connection to LA being, you know, my mom when she had me was a single mom,
Mhm.
and back in that time, churches would not christen your kids if you were born to a single mom or anything like that.
Really?
So my first like actual experience in church, as far as I know, not that I remember,
Mm.
as a baby, I had my christening in the church off Olvera Street in LA.
Oh
Yeah,
wow!
so that's where I had my
Amazing.
christening. And the first
Mhm.
time I actually remember going to church
Yeah.
was with my grandpa.
Mhm.
Um, and it was like this big giant warehouse. And I remember just very briefly like the Sunday school. I mean, I was pretty young, pretty young.
Mhm.
But by the time I probably was 6 or 7 years old, I was going to the Salvation Army. And a lot of times people don't realize that the Salvation Army actually is a church. That's how everything started.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
it
A religious
started in
organization. Yeah.
yeah, it
Yeah.
started in London, England by this gentleman named William
Mm.
Booth. And like,
Okay.
look, I have to learn, I learned all of the history because I grew up in the, going to the Salvation Army, and they have something
Oh.
called the Girl Guards and Sunbeams and,
Oh.
YSL, which was like, or YPL, which is like the Young People's Legion. So you
Mhm.
learn about the history of the church and
Mm,
everything
mhm.
like that.
Oh wow.
And, you know, I grew up, and my parents loved it because they would just send us with a check. They would pick the kids up. So they would pick us up, take us home.
Mm.
For like, I was there all the time. Like we were there Sundays for church, Wednesdays for Sunbeams. And, you know, I started out as a Sunbeam. Then I was in
Mhm.
Girl Guards.
That's
I was
cute.
in all of the Christmas musicals,
Like activities, like different things, like church group
always.
activities,
Yeah. All
food, like
kinds of stuff.
events. Oh, cool, cool, cool.
Yeah.
That's
And
cute.
so that's where I would go. And I would
Wow.
say we would have like the Sunday school was always amazing. But I think when you get a little bit older, you start getting like they're very like brass band type of church. Like
Uh-huh.
I learned even how to play trumpet when I was there because I went to music camp, I
Oh,
went to Girl
wow. That's
Guard
dope.
camp, I went to like, yeah, I went to all these camps. And um so that's where my relationship with God got
Mhm.
started.
Mhm, mhm.
And that's what happened. Then when I hit
Okay.
high school, I think I kind of dipped away a little bit. You have more extracurriculars when you're in high school. You have your friends, you kind of
Yeah.
let that.
Your own life going. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And I really kind of stopped going in high school. Probably
Mhm.
by my maybe freshman, sophomore year, I probably kind of just weaned just I think I would just not go as often.
Mhm.
And then we moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Oh, wow.
And my parents then wanted to get into church. So we started going to church there.
Oh.
And I never like, I just, you know, I had gone to Salvation Army from probably, like I said, like maybe 6 years old till I was 14, 15.
It's a long time.
Yeah, it was a
A big
very
chunk of
long
your
time.
childhood. Uh-huh. Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
And so I wasn't, and you're no longer in Sunday school when you're a teenager. You have to be like in the main service. So I
Yeah.
remember so many of us, there was the room for the daycare, and we would always want to be in that room. Like, can I be in the daycare room with the kid, with the babies?
The little guys, yeah.
Yeah. And so I didn't really honestly get back into church for several years. When we moved back to San Diego, I tried to go, but they had changed and it just didn't feel the same.
Mm,
I never stopped my belief and I never
mm,
stopped my faith,
mm,
but to find a home with other people, I didn't find that honestly until several years later, and until I was in my 20s. And at that point, I started going to a mega church in Dallas.
yeah.
And it was great. It was like, secular Christian music. And started volunteering, and I started feeling like part of a church family again.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good.
And from there, and then I had surgery. And when I had surgery, and I was like the leader, and I led the choir, and I was on, like, I was
Okay.
part of the whole thing.
Very involved, it sounds
Very,
like.
very involved.
Yeah.
And when I had knee surgery, it was my church family. Like, I was living in Texas
Mm,
and I was out of work for 7 weeks. I was on disability for 7 weeks and
mhm.
my parents couldn't come. So it was my church family who did, like, brought me meals, took me to the hospital for my surgery, brought me home.
That's really awesome.
It
Yeah,
was
that's really awesome.
honestly such
That's cool.
an amazing experience, because you
Wow.
had people who were really looking, like, who were
They
truly
showed up for
looking out for
you.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It
yeah.
wasn't just in name only, like, people were there,
Huge,
people
huge.
were bringing it. They were
It
they
wasn't
were
all talk like, "Oh,
It
sister,
wasn't just
sister,
all
oh, you're
talks,
my
it wasn't
sister."
just all thoughts
Right.
and prayers. Let me just say that,
Yep, 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 yep.
right?
Mhm.
Thoughts and prayers mean nothing without action.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. When someone can't get up to, right, if they're healing and they can't go to the market, they can't go to the kitchen and cook, like, it's really helpful to get, some assistance, right? Like from either friends, family, church community, from someone, right? And so that makes perfect sense. Like that's really cool. I'm so happy to hear that you had that experience, especially in like a large church, because I feel like, I don't know, sometimes when it's like a huge, huge congregation, because some of these congregations are like 1,000 people, it's like huge, right? Um, to hear that there was still that personal friendship and like care, that's very
Yeah.
cool.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it was because it was one of the campuses, like, it was one of the
Oh,
satellite campuses, so it wasn't
mhm.
it was smaller, but also I think through that, as lovely as it was, the internal struggle
Mm,
was very, very real.
mhm.
The internal struggle of, like, I'm doing everything that I could do, but then I would, you know, and I don't know how deep you get into this. So if you need to erase this, that's fine. I'm just trying to be super duper
Please.
honest. But in regards to, like, my sexual well being, right?
Mhm.
And trying to, because you're constantly being told, like, no, you need to save sex for marriage. And then, but as a woman in my 20s who was already sexually active, right, like,
Ugh,
how do
yeah.
you, like, I would not do anything, and then I would, like, go crazy, and
Feeling
then I
bad.
would feel guilty, and then I didn't want to say anything because I was so
Mhm.
involved. And I
Mhm.
just,
Mhm.
there was just so much internal struggle, because
Yeah. Yeah.
what everybody would see when I was at church. I mean, I was still the same person. Let me just say that. Like, the person who I am, that didn't ever change. But it was this one action,
Mm.
right? That I would let get me down, and I would beat
Mm.
myself up for.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think that if that's what you want to do, that's great. But if not, you're not going to hell. Right? And that's how you would feel. Like, you would feel like, oh my gosh, I did all this. And you would pray for, or I would pray for forgiveness and whatever. And I would be, quote unquote, like, on the wagon, I guess, so to speak, for a while. Then I would get off the wagon. So I just was like, then I just was like, oh, I can't take this anymore.
Yeah.
And then get off the wagon. And I think, um, that's not something that's talked about enough, right?
Right.
It's not talked
Mhm.
about enough in regards to Um, like that's why I think a lot of people, a lot of PKs,
Mm.
and a lot of people that grew up in the church get married so young.
Yep.
It's not necessarily that they, of course, I'm sure they love each other, but they wouldn't have gotten
There's a
married that
rush.
young if
There's a
they,
rush.
yeah,
Yep.
because they get married so young because they want to have sex. I'm not even gonna lie. I know it. I've heard them. I've talked to
Of
them,
course. Yeah. Yeah.
and, um,
Hmm.
and so I was like, look, my personal opinion of it, right? And look, it's my body, my
Hmm.
life,
Yeah.
but my personal thing was whoever I marry, I need to know that I'm sexually compatible with them. Whoever I marry, like if I don't know what I like, I cannot tell anybody else what I like or
Right.
how to touch me, how to kiss me, how to
Hmm.
whatever.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I think we're
So true.
so it in church culture, we're so concerned about like what somebody is doing with their body. We're not really connecting what are they doing with their mind, what are they doing with their heart.
1,000%. Thank you so much for sharing because I know it's something personal
Mhm.
and stuff. And this is so important because it's true. Like, for anyone, let's say, whether or not a person grew up in a religious household, even in their families, it, this sentiment, it does usually stem from religion, right? This respectability politics, save yourself for marriage, all of that, right? And let's be honest, all of that usually falls on the young girls, on the women,
Mhm.
right? It's the women that are shamed, it's the women that are slut shamed, it's the women that are called, all kinds of things. It's never the guys, right? It's never the young men, it's
Mm-mm.
never the, you know it never, that blame never falls on the men, right? That's a huge issue. And it's so interesting to me. So for example, like I've read a lot of articles and seen different interviews of, let's say, right, a young woman, they wait till they're married to have sex, and that's all good. But there's that young woman is so uncomfortable with their body, so uncomfortable with themselves, so scared of sex, so scared of the whole thing, that their wedding night that's supposed to be so magical and beautiful is awful. It's
Well,
like
let's just be
ruined.
honest. Most people that get married do not have sex on their wedding night, myself and my husband included. You were so exhausted
Right,
from
right, right.
everything else that happens that day.
Sure,
You are
yeah.
lucky if you don't pass out in what you got married in.
Right, right, right. Yeah, no, I can imagine. I can imagine. But yeah, just the sense of like that, we'll call it like that first time, right? That first
Mhm.
time as a married couple, right? Um, that yeah, like so that's kind of like the other side of the coin, right? When someone is so uncomfortable with their body, so uncomfortable with sexuality, that doesn't just disappear overnight. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
this, like I'm saving myself, sex is bad, sex is bad. That doesn't go away overnight. A person really has to accept themselves before they can really be physically connected to somebody else. I feel like in our culture we have like extremes, of course, right? We have like,
Girl.
right, it's like we have like the obsessive like hyper purity side, and then the like literally like anything goes. People are like going around everywhere all the time with anybody. No questions asked. It's like,
Yeah, I
we
think
have
yeah,
extremes.
it's
We have such a
for
it's crazy,
sure.
crazy extremes.
For sure. And then with even in church culture, excuse
Yeah,
me, in order to feel, and this might be too much for some people, but I think that these are things that have to be
need to
talked
be spoken.
about.
Yes, yes, yes.
But we don't even talk like it's even talked about like masturbation. No, you can't touch yourself. No, you don't. But
Oh yeah,
again, how
the
are you
silence
supposed to?
doesn't help. The
Yeah,
silence is not helping. Yeah, no.
no, these are definitely
Yeah.
conversations that need to be had and conversations that, like, again, we oftentimes, and me and you were talking about this in your interview with me, is we have to remember when it comes to the Bible, because the Bible is used for so many things.
Yes.
Ultimately, like you said, like what you said, the Bible did not just drop down, right? This was ultimately, the Bible was written by men.
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Men of a certain time, of a certain culture.
Mm-hmm.
So some of them are transcribing stories that have been passed down.
Sure.
Some of them are transcribing what they experienced.
Mm-hmm.
But these are not, I mean, I know we say the Bible is the word of God. No, it's the word of men telling their God stories. That's really what it is.
Ooh. I mean, it's there's definitely a, shall we say, a translation and a filtering process, right?
Mhm.
That's happening. And it's true. And I will say all the time, like, human beings are sexual creatures. Like, it's actually part of who we are.
Yeah.
Is
If God did
sexuality.
not want us to be sexual creatures, he wouldn't have made sex enjoyable if it was only meant
It's terrible.
to, yeah, if it was only meant to procreate. In fact, one time I had a friend over from church and he was helping
Mhm.
me with something and we started talking. I forget what we started talking about or how this subject came up,
Yeah.
but I have another friend, this was back in Texas, who is super, super involved in dog rescues and all of the, like, she's amazing at it.
Mhm.
Like, she is such a voice for
For animals. That's so cool.
animals
I love
and
dogs. I have 3 dogs.
yes, I have
Yeah, that's
two.
great. Okay.
And but he said something to the effect of having to be married and why are people getting married, or if you like, and having kids or something to that effect. I
Hmm.
cannot remember the exact, I just remember how I felt about, like,
Uh-huh.
the gist and what I felt.
Sure.
And I was like, if God didn't want people to have sex, he wouldn't have made it pleasurable. If God did
Good
not
point.
want, if it was only for kids, and he was like basically saying, like, why we got on my topic of my friend and who he doesn't know. So,
Hmm.
and he was like, well, she shouldn't be getting married. I forget, but I was like, but if, or about getting married and not having kids. And I know that's a lot of struggle for, like, for a lot of people right now, or they've just decided, no,
There's
I
a
don't
lot
want
of,
to
yes,
bring kids
yes,
into this crazy
world. Yeah.
world. And
For many reasons. For a
yeah,
lot of reasons. Like, oh my gosh. Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
just straight out told him, I said, you know what? I said, that may not be God's purpose for her. You do not know what God's purpose for her is.
Ooh, I love it.
I said, her
Ooh,
purpose
got
may
chills.
be
Yeah.
to help these animals, to help these dogs.
Mm.
And if she had kids, she would not be
At
able
the
to
time.
do that.
Hmm. That's right. That's right. That's right.
And he didn't really say anything because I don't think, again, he was a
Because there's
white
nowhere to
cis
think. Yeah.
man.
What can you say?
Yeah. So I don't think he ever thought of
Yeah.
anything beyond that. But, you know, I feel like that's one of the reasons that collectively people going to church, people seeking that out is getting
Yeah.
is shrinking and continually, like, the attendance is going down and everything like
Yeah.
that because
Yeah.
um people are tired of being shamed to
For
live their
everything.
everyday
Yes.
lives when
Exactly.
they may be such an amazing person, but then they do something, I slept with somebody, oh, how dare you, you're going to hell,
Yeah.
type of thing.
It's so
And the
true.
hypocrisy that
And the
happens.
hypocrisy there, um so I talk about religion and theology. It comes up quite a bit in my teaching and things because we're talking about culture and history and all that. And so I totally understand why people leave religion and why they leave Christianity or Catholicism specifically. Usually, well, there's a couple of things. It's like they still don't ordain in the Catholic Church, rather. Yeah, in the Roman Catholic Church, they still don't ordain women. Um, the continued homophobia, continued transphobia, right? Um, there's a lot of things, right? I get it. Like, truly, like, I have also wrestled, in other words, like, I've also wrestled with those questions myself. And I love what you said in terms of, like, backtracking for a second. I am 42. As of today, it's February 2025. I am not married. I do not have children. And so, right, like, people would look at me and be like, oh my God, what, right? Like, statistically or culturally or whatever, it's like, what a weirdo. Like, what a weirdo. But you know what? I'm living life. You know what I mean? Like, I'm
Lauren,
living life, and that's that. And then there's like the other side of it is like, okay, maybe that checklist is whatever, but I got to live in Spain. I have 5 degrees. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I can go out dancing on Friday night if I want to, and I don't have to
That's
ask
right.
anybody permission or get a babysitter. Thank you very much. I'm sure there's pros and cons to everything, right?
Mhm.
And everything in life. And so anyway, it's just interesting, like these standards. And again, it's a great question. Who created these standards? Like,
Mhm.
who's making up these rules,
Yeah.
honestly? Yeah.
No, it's so funny because I didn't meet my husband until I was 44, 40. Maybe I just turned 45. I mean, I'm
Oh
47 now.
wow. Oh my gosh.
So,
I kind of love that. I'm just gonna say,
no,
like, that warms my heart.
and I got married at 46. We haven't even
Good
been
for you.
married a year as of today, right?
Wow. Oh my gosh. Good
So,
for you.
um, everybody's on their own,
Amazing.
like, you know, the plan
Everyone's
for
path, man.
everybody, it's so different. And for me, like I was super involved. I did have conflict. I was still very
Yes.
involved. But when I really started pulling away
Mm.
from church, and I honest was during the 20 no, I'm sorry, 2016. Because we
Yeah.
did start noticing. So I went to the downtown campus of this
Mhm.
particular megachurch,
Mhm.
and it was
Mm.
very diverse, which was,
Really?
yeah, it
Okay.
was
Mm.
super duper
That's
diverse
interesting.
there.
Mhm.
And but then we started noticing, like, people being moved to certain areas. All of a sudden the diversity started kind of going
Shifting.
down, shifting a
Mm.
little bit. And then when it really shifted was when the lead pastor, when his one of his daughters got married,
Uh-huh.
all of a sudden now they're the pastors of this campus.
Oh, the new couple.
The new
The
couple. The,
ah.
and I was actually friends with the oldest daughter,
Mhm.
and you know, we weren't like super friends. We were like, oh, hey, how's it going, Jessica?
Cordial.
Oh,
Yeah.
how's it?
Yeah.
You know, like cordial. We would be at events together and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's when I really started noticing transition. And when he started inviting people uh, to come and uh, to come and be speakers,
Mm.
like Glenn Beck, I was like, I'm not okay with
Oh.
this. Yeah, I'm like, I'm not okay with
Okay.
this. And
Interesting.
then
Yeah.
he did a series of what would Jesus say to whoever, right? And one was
Mhm.
like Kim and Kanye, and
Oh.
we had these big headaches. But one was Ellen
Oh gosh.
DeGeneres, and this is and it what and it's
Oh.
prior to, but about being, you know, um, by being a homosexual, or
Mhm.
obviously in her case of being a lesbian. And
So
I
I'm assuming the message was like right? It was
right,
like, okay.
yeah, it's like what would Jesus say to
Wow.
Ellen? And
Interesting.
it would, and
Interesting.
I was not agreeing with these things. Like,
Right.
I would
Right.
actually
Uncomfortable.
I would do the, like, worship part, and then I would
Mhm.
step out because
Mhm.
I was like, you know what? I don't agree with this sermon. I don't agree.
Mhm.
So, but
Mhm.
then um the moment he came out to the congregation and said, vote for the person, or vote for the party, not the person, basically telling the whole congregation to vote for Donald Trump.
Wow.
That was the that wasn't my last day in the church, because I knew I was already moving at that
You're
point.
already feeling, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like I was already moving back to California from
Oh,
at that point. I
yeah,
already knew.
yeah.
Um, but that was like the
Wow.
last time my heart was into that church and into
Wow,
like
interesting.
anything, because I was just
That's
like,
intense.
and that's immediately you started seeing an immediate shift in the attendance of church and who was attending the church. Um, and
Wow.
I only was there maybe a couple more months. And the only reason I stayed was because of the other connections that I had, like the
The other
people.
friendships, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but I would like
Mm,
constantly leave from the service.
wow.
I was trying to like get what I could. That's what I would say. I was trying to get what I could from those messages, and then and then
Mm,
toss out the rest, so to speak. Or because, but then once I moved back to California,
yeah.
I haven't really been part, and that was in 2017. I tried, but I haven't really found anything. And it's been really, the couple times that I have tried, I felt so uncomfortable
It's
because,
very hard.
yeah,
Yeah. Oh my
I'm like,
God.
what is your stance on immigration? What is your stance on the LGBTQ community? What is your
Hmm.
stance in regards to even, and now, why this wasn't then, but what is your stance on what's happening in the Gaza Strip and in Palestine?
Hmm.
What is your stance in, like, those are all things that are very, very important to me.
Yeah.
And and I felt very, I just have not felt a place where I could call a church home.
Oh my gosh. I I appreciate you sharing this so much, Jessica. It's tough because like yeah, I mean, so I was raised Catholic and everything. And so I should say this. I've visited and tried a lot of different parishes. Right. I have actually spent time at mosques, spent time at temples, spent time with the Mormon church. I mean, I've really, I feel like I've really dabbled and dipped around, all these different traditions. And as I'll speak to like the Catholic Church, I really struggle because there's so many times where I want to stand up and be like, that's not true. That's not accurate. I have the PhD to back me. I know that's not correct. Because like if we want to like really go toe to toe, it's like I know the theology very well. So I know that what they're saying is not right. And
Mhm.
so it's tough. It's tough because I think I don't know, is it going to say like I feel like human beings, we seek community, we seek belonging. If you're a person of faith, it's awesome to be connected to other people who also believe. And so finding the right community is really hard. Like, so for example, people are like, oh, why don't you go to like these like non-denominational, da, da, da. I'm like, I have tried. I can't stand it. I'm like, it doesn't work for, I don't like it either.
Yeah.
I don't like it. I feel like it's so watered down. I'm being very kind of bold here. I don't like the music. I don't like the messages. I don't like the style of the services. I don't like it.
Mhm.
The beautiful parts of the Catholic Mass still move me. Maybe because they're part of my childhood, right? Maybe because it's part of like what I grew up with. Um, you know, so I struggle
Yeah.
too. Believe me, like I struggle too in terms of like finding the right community. Like it can be really challenging, especially
Oh,
too, like
totally.
especially when pretty much when like the community, like or rather the leadership shows their cards, right? When they reveal like, okay, this is, we're anti-immigrant, we're anti-this, we're anti-that. It's like, okay, well, maybe I don't belong here because this is awful, right? Like it's, yeah,
Which is
it's
so
really hard.
crazy to me, because I'm like, if you
It is.
actually read the Bible, like everything that you're doing is going against what the Bible says. Because even when it comes to, like, these people are like abortion under no circumstance, but even in the Bible it says if you have to choose between the mother and the child, you choose the mother's
Mother's life.
life.
Yeah.
It says to
Yeah.
welcome your neighbor, welcome the immigrants onto your land, to feed
Refugees,
them, to
like,
clothe them.
yeah.
And look what's happening right now. So, you know people like to weaponize the Bible, and then we know, like you were saying in the beginning, like the translations and stuff.
Mhm.
Homosexuality, there was nothing about homosexuality in the Bible until I think the 50s,
Mm.
right? And when an American, I don't know if he was a pastor, who translated it as if, now why do we say that's word? Like, it was not even in there prior to, but now it's word, and
Yeah.
we want to condemn the LGBTQ plus community. And it's, again, the I still have faith in God. I still believe in Jesus. I have faith in I feel like it's part of the
Higher
whole
power.
greater
Mhm.
universe, higher power thing,
Totally, totally.
because if you do believe in them, you do believe in the universe. Now, maybe you may
Mhm.
not believe in them, but you believe in what the universe can bring you, right?
Sure,
So, which
sure.
which is still fine. Or, there's, but ultimately, um as it's been done for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, people use the Bible and use God's name to create
Mhm.
war, whether it's war amongst yourselves, whether it's war amongst your family, whether it's
Yeah.
war against a group of people.
Yeah.
You know,
Sadly, yeah. Yeah.
it's getting really crazy and really out of hand, and there's so many people perishing, like, and we don't talk about, like, it's easier to, get through the eye of a needle if you're a camel than if you're a rich person, because ultimately when you have that much power, all you crave is more power.
Yeah. It's true. Like, unfortunately, I think that yeah, we're living in a time where greed is really running the show. You know what I mean? Like that insatiable need to possess and control more and more and more and have more and more and more. It's not enough to have 3 houses, you have to have 10 houses, and then 5 cars, and then 20 cars. Like, it's
And then
nonstop. It's nonstop.
that need to, like, for a lot of these mega church pastors to
Mm.
live so lavishly.
Oh, they have private jets and they're Armani suits, and it's like, whoa, buddy, what happened to meek and humble? Like, oh my god,
Yeah,
it's wild. It's
it
it's
is.
crazy.
It is.
Yeah.
So that's been my journey right now.
Mm,
I still have
I
not gone
appreciate
back to
you.
church. I do still have belief, but
Yeah.
I just don't know. And my mother-in-law actually said she found a church in Oregon. She lives here in San Diego as well, but
Uh-huh.
that she was like, "Oh my gosh, after the election, this pastor came out and was like, we still have so much work to do, blah, blah, blah." Like, she was like, "I might just move to Oregon just because that church was so
Oh my
great." Like,
goodness. Ah,
she's an activist. She's on the board, like, for the
that's
Farm
really cool.
Workers of America and the Cesar Chavez Foundation and all of that. So
Oh
she's,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh my
but
goodness.
um I think I just haven't found that yet. And I don't,
Yeah.
to be perfectly honest, I don't know that I will. That doesn't stop me from cracking my Bible. That doesn't stop me from,
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
taking, but here the thing is I take it with a grain of salt, knowing, again, it is a book written by men
Mm.
regarding their experience with God.
Yeah, totally. And you know what? It's so interesting. Like, so in Latin American liberation theology, the comunidades de base are basic ecclesial communities. They're basically like home churches. They were basically just a couple people getting together, talking about God, talking about faith, sharing scripture if they wanted to, whatever. And those are so powerful. In other words, like, to have a strong relationship with the creator or higher power or universe, however a person wants to understand it, you don't have to go to a certain building. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to meet with
Church
other
is the
people in a
people, not the
building.
building.
The church is absolutely, absolutely. The church is the people. It's about faith. It's about, like, your connection to
Yeah.
other human beings. Really, it's about your connection to other human beings and to, like, your source, higher power, creator. Um, I love this though. This was so good. Thank you, Jessica. No, this is amazing. This is super, super cool. And I feel you, man. I feel you. It has been a journey. It has been a journey for sure. Um, Before we kind of wrap up today, I did want to ask you, because I think many of us are kind of in this journey of healing the inner child, right? I think there's a lot, especially I think on social media right now, people are talking about, like, the inner Nina, healing my younger self. What would I tell my younger self? So I'm curious what advice you would give to little Jessica, or what advice you would give to young women today.
I kind maybe hopefully I can do both, but I would
Sure.
say growing up I was a very insecure little girl.
Mm.
I was really insecure because I was chunky, because I had curly hair. Back then people didn't know what the hell to do with curly hair.
Same,
Let's be
same, same.
honest, right?
Yeah, same, same.
Um, because, then I felt like too much and not enough at the same time. And so I would tell little Jessica to stay true to who you are. I would tell her it's going to be okay.
Mm.
You are so amazing, and you have such a big heart.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's what's going to get you through.
It's
There's going to
beautiful.
be ups, there's going to be downs, and nothing will ever be perfect.
Mm.
But you need to keep the positive outlook on life that you have and your big heart, and that will get you through. So that's what I would tell my little Jessica, my inner Nina.
Mm-hmm.
As far as like beyond that, young women, um, I would say find, pursue your passions. Do
Mm.
not let anybody dictate what you're going to do with your life, because you're
Right.
the one who has to live your life. Do not let anybody shame you.
Mm-hmm.
Do not let anybody dictate what you should do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think, you're going to make mistakes, learn from the mistakes,
Sure.
because that's the only way you're going to get better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
love yourself as hard as it is with all of these external reinforcement, positive, negative, whatever. Ultimately, the person who has to live with you every day from the day that you're born to the day that you die is you.
Mm-hmm.
So as
Mm-hmm.
long as you are in good standing with yourself, that's
Right.
that's ultimately what matters.
Ah, I love it. That is so beautiful. Oh my gosh. I totally relate to the having curly hair, not being the body. Oh gosh. Ooh, we don't have time for it. We don't have time to get into all that, right? About like body type and beauty standards and all that. But I really love what you said. And it's true. I think that's such a beautiful message that if you can kind of like when you go to sleep at night that you have peace in your heart as far as like who you are as a person, that you've been living true to yourself. I think that is such a powerful message.
Yeah,
And yeah, pursuing your dreams and not letting other people kind of like deter you from that. I think that's so amazing.
because I
Yeah.
think we do that so much. Like people say, "Oh, you can't do that. Oh no,
Oh.
you can't do that." Blah blah blah. And you know, let me just say, I shocking. I was a talker in school, so and now look what I do, right? Like I was
See?
discouraged from talking and
Oh my
everything,
gosh.
and now you talk to anybody who knows me, which I do still have a lot of friends that I've known since even kindergarten. Um, and if you ask them, or if I hadn't talked to them and you said, "Oh, remember Jessica? She has a pot." Oh yeah, figures. Yeah, I see that.
I love it. It makes sense. Oh my gosh. No, that's fantastic. Oh my gosh. This was so amazing. How awesome. This was a really beautiful episode, Jessica.
Oh,
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you,
Yay.
Lauren.
Thank you again for being here today. So this again is my amazing basic um, guest, Jessica Yañez, the Wine and Chisme Podcast. And thank you everyone for listening, for joining us today. This is the Gold Hoops and God podcast. New episodes are out every Wednesday. The podcast is available everywhere you listen to your podcast. So Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeart, you name it. I'm there. And then
Same.
you can find, yay, it's me. Yes. And you can find Jessica's podcast too. Do you want to share which platforms you're on? Are you on
So
any
it's the Wine and Chisme podcast. Yeah, we're on all platforms, including YouTube.
perfect?
And if you want to connect with us on social, it's at the Wine and Chisme on TikTok, Instagram, Threads, like all of those things. And we're always looking for guests. So I will say we are very, about amplifying voices across communities of color. So if you come from, the BIPOC community and want to share your story, go to the wineandchismepodcast.com.
Perfect. Yay. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here. Gold Hoops and God. Check us out every Wednesday, and you'll find the video of the conversation on YouTube as well. Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.